In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA conducted a sinister secret program to master the science of mind control. While the secret studies might sound like the stuff of horror science fiction, sometimes the truth is even stranger. Beginning in 1945, American and British organizations teamed up to gather as much military, scientific, and technological research as possible throughout occupied Germany. As German research facilities were seized, Allied force groups began to confiscate war-related documents and materials and interrogate scientists. One particular document was the Ausenberg List, a catalog of scientists and engineers working at the service of the Third Reich. Run by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, or JIOA, the covert operation dubbed Operation Overcast, then renamed Operation Paperclip, involved having 1,600 German scientists and their families brought to the US during the Cold War to work on America's behalf.
So basically, the United States wants to become victorious during the Cold War, and in order to do that, they had to advance in technology and in their weaponry. And what they did was they ran tests on people to do this, okay? You can't just go to war with weapons or go to war with any type of, because they were using chemical and biological weapons. So how would they know whether or not they were going to succeed? They had to test humans. So for example, during the Holocaust, when Hitler was killing all of the Jews, how did he know exactly what chemical to use in the gas chambers? So along with being tortured and starving, what he would do is kill them off as well. The ones that, I believe it was the ones that couldn't perform the task that they wanted them to do, be their slaves. So they put them in these gas chambers. And this helped them because it allowed them to be able to test out how long it would have an effect on a human being, because they wanted to use these, they wanted to use these weapons of war. So how long it would take before they get killed off, how strong it would have to be, how powerful it would have to be, and not too powerful, to where whoever is dropping this biological or chemical weapon isn't killed off with them. So they have to test these things out before using them.
Learned that the Russians had developed mind control programs, the CIA wanted to find out how US spies would hold up if it was used against them. With this in mind, Operation Bluebird, later called MK-Ultra, was created by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. Despite going against the Nuremberg Code, which prohibits experimentation on human subjects without their consent, MK-Ultra was conducted in secrecy for over a decade and experimented with, quote, the use of biological and chemical materials in altering human behavior. This amounted to many experiments being carried out on an estimated thousands of many of whom did not know exactly what they were signing up for. Some of the subjects included sex workers, prisoners, and people with terminal illness. And many of the experiments involved the administration of illegal drugs. According to journalist Stephen Kinzer, who wrote the book Poisoner in Chief about Gottlieb, Gottlieb wanted to create a way to seize control of people's minds, and he realized that it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away the existing mind. Second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into that resulting void. And what did Dr. Sidney Gottlieb believe was the best way to blast away the existing mind? A newly created drug called LSD.
Now, an example I can give you of what I've witnessed with my own eyes, and a lot of people have, whether they realize it or not, is homeless people. So I didn't really see this a lot in Jersey, but I did see this a lot when I came to Atlanta. There would be homeless people and they would be sounding like they're out of their minds, but they would literally be talking about things that they went through while going through these brainwashing experiments. And they would be talking about the government. They would be talking truth, but they sound crazy, to the untrained ear. Like, I can hear what they're trying to say, but everybody thinks they're crazy. I mean, they'll be talking about Michael Jackson and how he corrupted the minds of people and how he was used as a puppet, but they would be screaming this type of stuff out loud. There was one guy who said that the government ran tests on him and put a chip in him. And he was at like this store and he was just going off about how they was basically, brainwashing him. He was going crazy. And I actually took the time to listen. And what happened was, as I'm talking to him, mind you, this is someone who was clearly under mind control. And he was like, it's not me. They put something in my head or something like that. They can hear me. I can't say too much. And so people would think that that's crazy. But since I know about this stuff, I wanted to really like ask a question about it. And while I'm talking to him, the Lord told me to say breakfast. And when I said breakfast, he started freaking out. And that was crazy to me. What's crazier is that I recorded it, but I had to make videos. The Lord was telling me to make videos, so I had to delete it. It was a really long video. I couldn't keep it on my phone. Clearly, I need more storage on my phone. Or I just need to get a camera. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. So yeah, this type of stuff exists. Like even these prostitutes, like the government, they're working with prostitutes. So they go hand in hand, the pimps, the prostitutes, and the Freemasons, okay? That's why even though it's illegal, it's still happening. Sex trafficking is still happening. And while these people are abducted, they go through these different situations, different abuse. And that's why they're able to function a certain way, okay? Because of all of this mind control that they're going through. That's how pimps control these prostitutes, through mind control.
The CIA committed murder.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
In the early days of the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control. They funded an army of psychiatric institutions across the United States and Canada to perform experiments on unsuspecting patients using psychedelic drugs, sensory deprivation, electroshock treatment, and more. The program was known by its codename, MKUltra. At the end of the Korean War, a number of freed American POWs came home seemingly brainwashed and espousing communist propaganda. American officials suspected that the soldiers had been subjected to what they thought were new communist mind control techniques. Alarmed by the situation, the newly formed CIA allocated $25 million for psychiatric experiments on human beings.
It was the most secret program ever conducted by the CIA in the United States. Patients at psychiatric hospitals, prisoners in federal institutions, and even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness or consent and experimented upon.
Initial projects within MKUltra included Operation Midnight Climax.
They established what were called safe houses, where prostitutes would lure men to these apartments. And then once the men were in the apartments, they were dosed with LSD. And then they were basically studied by CIA scientists, usually behind a two-way mirror.
Another common practice was the hosting and observing of LSD-induced parties with live music. These parties were called acid tests, and the culture that grew out of them played a key role in the development of the hippie and psychedelic movements a few years later. However, some of the most damaging experiments occurred at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. There, under the direction of infamous Scottish-American psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron, unsuspecting patients, many of whom had common ailments such as postpartum depression, were experimented on with aggressive drug cocktails and extreme techniques.
My father was a victim of Dr. Cameron. He was a 27-year-old healthy skier, canoer, very athletic, and he had asthma. They told him if he went to the Allen Memorial, they could cure his asthma.
My father, Charles, was a patient of Dr. Cameron's. He had a trigeminal neuralgia, it's called, where there's a pain in the temple that radiates into the jaw that apparently is excruciatingly painful. They told him that it was psychosomatic, which it's not, but in those days, what did they know? So they sent him to a shrink. This shrink that he went to was working with Cameron, although we didn't know. So he put my father right into the program.
I was having trouble with my parents. My father and my stepmother decided to put me in the Allen Memorial Institute. They had no idea what went on in there. I was 16 when I was there.
Dr. Cameron pursued a concept he called depatterning, which was meant to reduce patients to an infantile psychological state wherein doctors could take advantage of the person's cognitive vulnerability to attempt to rebuild their mind under the doctor's control. A popular method of choice to achieve this was called psychic driving.
The day that my father was brought to the hospital, they immediately put him on insulin to put him into like an insulin coma. They took clips from the interview with the shrink and put it on tape to run a loop under his pillow while he was put into this sleep treatment.
He also was put in an insulin coma for 36 days with a recording beside him saying that your mother hates you over and over and over and over and over.
That was beside my bed constantly, repeated 250,000 and 500,000 times.
So what this is showing is that the government knows exactly how to put people under their control without having them on chains. They can still make people slaves. They've done enough studying, they've done enough experiments, human testing, to know how to get people to do what they want them to do. So repetition is a way. They figured this out with all of this human testing, how powerful repetition is, that they played a recording over and over and over while they were in a deep state or in an infantile state of mind, while they were the most vulnerable, not paying attention to anything. They were isolated. They figured out exactly what to do to control the masses, to brainwash people.
Another common method was the use of extreme Page-Russell electroshock therapy.
Page-Russell shock treatment is approximately 40 to 75 times the strength of a normal shock treatment. So it's really designed to wipe out the memory.
He received 54 high voltage shock treatments, followed by 54 grand mal seizures.
After 27 days of this, they said that they were discouraged because he still had ties to his former life, in that he was asking to see his wife. They decided to give him more Page-Russell shock treatments and put him to sleep for another 30 days.
When patients were released from the Allen Memorial, they and their families' lives would never be the same again.
Well, there's a lot I could not remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were.
He never came out the same. He had a blank look in his eye. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know we were his daughters. He lost his job. We went into poverty after he came out.
He had said in his interview with the shrink that I was the apple of his eye. And after he came home, he started beating me not long after.
In 1973, the MKUltra program was terminated, and some of the evidence of its activities was systematically erased.
The whole thing was basically discovered because of a whistleblower named John Marks, who wrote the first book really about the program called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. There were congressional hearings here in the United States in the mid-70s after it had been exposed. And during those hearings, the CIA finally admitted that this program existed. They admitted that it was probably not the right thing to do, but they feigned innocence.
Despite the congressional hearings and marginal interest in the subject in popular culture, most MKUltra survivors suffered in silence, taking their trauma with them to the grave.